So this is my video for week 2 of the YouTube videos with the chapters 1 through 4 of Legal Argument. This was kind of review because I had James Gardner, the author, last semester for Law 101, and we did spend some time working on syllogisms and legal argument. But this again was like a nice refresher, and just like there were like certain details that like maybe I didn't retain as much then that like I do now. But chapter 1 was pretty much just explaining like the format of syllogisms and like how they're constructed kind of. It's in 3 parts. There's the major premise, the minor premise, and the conclusion. And the examples that's always in the book that everybody uses is the like Socrates example of all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is immortal. And then I love the like math kind of equation of it all. I love that if A equals B and B equals C, that means A must equal C, because that's exactly what the syllogism is. And the way that the book like kind of formats that equation, I think really can help someone who sees things like mathematically. They can like see it as like an equation or like a format. I also have just in my notes here, because I have them pulled up, that if your listeners accept your premises, they have to accept your conclusion. Because if you accept that all men are mortal and Socrates is a man, then you have to accept that Socrates is mortal, because you're accepting that all men are mortal and Socrates is a man. So if A equals B and B equals C, A has to equal C. It's very like straightforward, which I like. There's no like if this, if that. I also like the legal example that they have in the book, where it says to be enforceable, a contract must be supported by consideration. The contract between A and B is supported by consideration. Therefore, the contract between A and B is enforceable. I don't know if that's like the exact quote from the book. That's just what I put in my notes. But it's like nice because it's not just like, Socrates and a man. Like you can apply it to legal arguments, and like that's an example of one. I also like how they add in like the weakness of analogies. And Gardner kind of taught this in his Law 101 class, or he would do this sometimes. Like, analogies can be useful to a point, but someone could just undermine it and be like, okay, and what? Like, what about it? Like, what are you getting to? Where a syllogism is like, this point, so what is this point? Like, the structure of it leads you to a conclusion. And like again, if the people you're arguing to or your audience, like if they agree with premises like A and B, then they have to agree to the conclusion C. Chapter 2 is more of determining your conclusion from your position. So as a lawyer, you're going to want to argue whatever's best for your client, and you want to pick the strongest argument. You want to pick the winning one. I mean, you don't want to pick an argument that you can't defend, or like maybe your premises aren't very strong or you can't ground them. So you have to argue what's going to win the case. You can't change your conclusion either, because that's not what's going to be best for your client, and that's going to leave a very weak argument. Chapters 3 and 4 are more about building the premises, and I think it's interesting that we start with a conclusion and then go to premises. I guess it makes sense because you're figuring out what you're arguing and then like how to support it. But I don't know, something about starting with the conclusion, like I guess I didn't necessarily think of things that way until I learned like the syllogism model. But building the premises, like they have to yield the conclusion that you want. You have to like, for example, like the contract is supported by consideration, the contract is valid. So if you want to argue that the contract of your client is valid, your premises pretty much have to include like why it's valid. Like there's consideration that supports it, there was an offer that they accepted, etc. And with your premises, the wording has to match. Like, for example, something that doesn't match that would make the premises like invalid would be like all men are mortal. Socrates appears to be a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. You're using different language, which like weakens your argument and makes it invalid. No one cares that Socrates appears to be a man. Is he a man or is he not? You have to be specific, and sometimes maybe if your present or premises aren't as strong or maybe need better like support, you ground them. There's direct and indirect grounding. So direct is like the sun shines in the morning. Like you can't really argue that it doesn't because it's like common knowledge and like, you know, George Washington was the first president. Like it's not like anybody could just be like no. Like those are pretty common, like you can't argue those. But there is like indirect grounding for maybe things that are more things that could be disputed more, like, oh, this intersection is dangerous. That's the example that they use in the book. And you can be like, well, what makes it dangerous? There's X amount of accidents per year. It supersedes this standard that, you know, it is what the government qualifies as dangerous. Therefore, the intersection is dangerous. And they put in a really nice model in the book where they show like the syllogism, like the major syllogism, and then how it grounds, like supporting each premise. And I think that's really nice in a way because it shows like how it's defended and how like you come to the premise and how it's defended. There's also multiple grounding, which in the book I feel like it was kind of unclear. Like, so if you have multiple points, for example, you know, the intersection argument, you could say, well, it's argument because it supersedes this amount of accidents and it's on a blind corner, and that's obviously like if I don't have the multiple groundings point of it. For multiple groundings, that's another like way I guess that you can defend your premises. So if there's multiple points, like multiple reasons why this intersection is dangerous, you can add them in hopes to strengthening your argument. And most of the time I think it will. Like in my opinion, I feel like if you have multiple reasons why, you know, an intersection is dangerous, why Socrates is mortal, like that's gonna help your argument. But in the book it said sometimes that like if the other grounding is like weaker, like you just shouldn't include it and you should just stay with your like really one strong grounding. I feel like in my opinion, I would rather have just like more reasons to ground something. I feel like that would make the argument stronger. But I guess maybe if you have something really weak, then it wouldn't really be effective in a way.